The media smearing RFK Jr. It certainly turned its gaze on the independent presidential candidate in the wake of Biden's disastrous debate performance and Trump's felony convictions. That must mean only one thing: he's doing well enough to warrant their attention and their fear. In one article, Vanity Fair published a picture of him posing with, and this is disgusting, the barbecued remains of what they suggested was a dog. Now, RFK since denied that claim that it was a dog. Let's watch.
Now, that is a real photo. It's of me at a campfire in Patagonia on the Fulaifu River eating a goat, which is what we eat down there.
RFK Jr. then mocked the news cycle, posting this video on Twitter.
You know what I'm doing? I'm making steak and chicken for the dogs. I don't normally do this. But ever since that guy wrote the article about me saying I ate a dog, it hasn't been the same. Now I gotta work my way back into their good graces. This was my dinner. I'm giving him my food. This is the height of irresponsible journalism. I mean, I don't care what it does for me, but look at these guys. These guys will believe in anything they hear on the news. Yeah, Daddy would never do something like that. It was a goat.
The Vanity Fair article also featured a former babysitter of RFK Jr.'s who said he sexually assaulted her in his kitchen. Responding to a quote about the allegation, RFK Jr. said he was, quote, not a church boy. He had a, quote, rambunctious youth, and that Vanity Fair is recycling 30-year-old stories. But then, when directly asked whether he denied the sexual assault, he said, I'm not going to comment on it. Vanity Fair also alleged when RFK was known to send images of himself nude, or of nude women, to his friends while he was married to his second wife. But that's not all. RFK made headlines all over again with a tweet about 9/11 over the weekend. RFK Jr. wrote, quote, my take on 9/11. It's hard to tell what is a conspiracy theory and what isn't, but conspiracy theories flourish when the government routinely lies to the public. As president, I won't take sides on 9/11 or any of the other debates. But what I can promise is that I will open the files and usher in a new era of transparency. In a recent New York Times Siena poll, RFK Jr. earned 8% of the vote compared to Trump with 42% and Biden with 37%. The bad news cycle had come after his bad press back in May, where the New York Times and others published a story about how doctors once found a dead worm in RFK Jr.'s brain. So I'm dying to know RFK Jr.'s take on 9/11, pro or against. I think we all are. But
that was not. I think that was not worded the best. It's okay to take sides on 9/11. It's okay to have a pretty firm moral commitment there. His point that we don't necessarily know what's true. I mean, that there certainly are conspiracy theories about 9/11, but also we were misled about the extent of Saudi involvement, and time and time again, as it turns out, with national security subjects, we can't trust our own government. And I agree with the idea that we should have greater transparency around these and other topics. So I didn't think that was. I mean, the tweet should have just been worded differently on the taking sides on 9/11 part of it. But I didn't see anything particularly wrong with that sentiment, nor do I care about the goat that he ate. I thought his response video there was pretty funny. Now, in this Vanity Fair article, there are obviously more serious accusations of sexual harassment and misconduct that he has sort of responded to by saying, that he does have troubled past. He's been very frank about his drug abuse, drug addiction that he's struggled with. My standpoint on a lot of these kinds of things is I don't really know that it's possible or worthwhile to adjudicate disputes or misconduct that goes back 20 or 30 years. That's kind of my standard across the board. If people feel differently and think that's not a reason to vote for him, that is, of course, your right to think that. At the same time, if you're really hung up on that, I have bad news for you about both Trump and Biden's personal behavior and the accusations against them, which are in both cases worse. It's focused on Trump an awful lot, and understandably, but of course there has been reporting on the people who have accused Biden of various levels of discomfort, and then also sexual misconduct. Again, going back so far that I don't think it can be properly adjudicated. And if you were to say to me, while I respect women and think they should come forward and they should be heard and listened to and they should not be discounted, at the same time, there is no, what is the evidentiary standard for deciding this kind of thing now, and this is not a reason not to vote for someone. I respect that, and it should just be applied across the board, I think, in all three cases, really.
Right. If you're not voting for RFK Jr. because of the sexual assault allegations, you probably shouldn't cast a ballot for Trump or Biden either. It's sad that everyone we have to pick from is someone with a past like that. But a lot of folks have responded to this recent smear campaign against RFK Jr. and have said, well, this means he's a real contender now. That when you're really a contender for president, people are going to write articles like this about you, and this is his ushering in. So maybe, 10 slanderous articles in Vanity Fair, the New York Post, and op-ed columns of the Times and the Post. Now you can be on the debate stage. I think they should adjust the criteria to instead how many slanderous articles are written about you. I do find there to be some truth to that, Robbie, that if you have slanderous articles written about you, if people are digging up dirt from your past, it's because you're a real threat. You're a real contender. Yeah,
and also from the media's perspective, the threat that RFK Jr. represents is, I think in some ways they're getting it wrong. And that Vanity Fair article was, was very, it was panicky in kind of spirit and vibe about the effect RFK Jr. is having on the country. It goes into, again, it foregrounds how against him running his family is. This is a conversation subject that the mainstream media has been really invested in. How could he run even though his family doesn't agree with him? That I don't understand why that matters at all. Most Americans have, maybe just it's people in the media are the only people who don't have differences of opinion with their families, because elite media people it's nepotism and they all agree on elite liberal progressivism. Everywhere else, people have political disagreements with their families all the time, and it shouldn't be weird that the situation he's in, where many other members of his family don't agree with his candidacy. So to keep hitting that has always been odd to me. But so there's a level of panic in the Vanity Fair article about him, when, as we've seen, even though when we've seen from the polling is that he takes some votes from Biden, he takes some votes from Trump, he takes some votes probably from the Libertarian candidate and maybe some other independent candidates. He takes votes from people, takes is the wrong word, earns the votes of people who wouldn't have been voting otherwise. So even if you are panicked about him from a pro-Biden perspective, I don't think the data really supports that he is this that his presence is detrimental to Biden to such an obvious degree. Like, that's not coming through. And if it starts being the case where Biden people are defecting to RFK Jr., well, I mean, that's on Biden at this point. That's on him for his really pitiful debate performance, for sticking it out, for being in this race despite his dwindling chances and despite the concerns that so many Americans have about his ability to even serve as president. Like, that's just not RFK Jr.'s fault. That's his fault.
Also very understandable that the Kennedy family has some reservations about a family member seeking the highest office, considering how that's gone for the Kennedys in the past and how RFK Jr. has said that's one of his biggest fears. That could just mean his family loves him very much and wants him out of harm's way. That family is traumatized. I mean, it's not like they're telling him not to run because they think he would be a bad president or is a bad guy. It's just ridiculous to take the families who may have differing opinions, right? Of course, that's a very legitimate reason. There are a lot of bleeding heart liberals in the family. But I think also a lot of his close family members are afraid for him. And when he was on the Joe Rogan interview, one of the only candidates that's really, sat down for a very long interview and talked in depth on policy issues, he talked about that. This is someone who's very open with the public. And I think that is what makes him different from Trump and Biden. While Trump will talk about any topic, he says a lot of words and we don't get a lot of information from them. He's willing to talk about anything, but certainly isn't willing to show his hand in terms of his policy perspectives or his personal opinion, because he doesn't want to be held to them once he gets in office if he wants to do something else. And so I think what RFK Jr. brings to the table is potentially forcing the two frontrunners to be more upfront about their actual opinions and what policies they support. And I think that's why they're afraid of him. I think that's why they would rather slander him than compete with him at his level of competition.
And to your point, it's just inexcusable to not have him on the debate stage at this point. He is drawing significant independent support. His poll numbers, I don't care if it doesn't literally meet the threshold they decided on. The threshold is totally arbitrary. They are not playing by any actual rules, and the rules of the debate commission were arbitrary themselves, but they've thrown them out anyway. They could absolutely include him if they wanted to. Joe Biden and Donald Trump can both whine about it, but there is no excuse for shielding the American people from a major candidate, especially in this moment we're in, with widespread dissatisfaction with Donald Trump for a variety of reasons, including his behavior after he lost the last election. He's been criminally convicted and is facing more issues. Obviously, people can have a variety of opinions about whether those kinds of criminal actions being brought against him have validity or are fair, but Trump is himself a very controversial figure who is beloved by many in the Republican Party, but is unpopular in a lot of other corners of the country. Biden, same deal. I don't know that he's especially worshipped or beloved by any contingent, but did win the last election. And many Democrats have questions about whether he can serve again, especially now in recent weeks. There's these massive red flags for the two major party candidates. There are other people in the race, and not just RFK Jr., Jill Stein, Chase Oliver, Cornel West, et cetera. We've tried to platform as many of these people as we can. We have them on our show. We have RFK Jr. on. We have the Green Party on. We have the Libertarian Party on. Working to get Cornel West on because we think Americans should know that there are other choices. Your vote is not owned. It's not owed to Joe Biden or Donald Trump as much as the major parties want to convince you that is the case.
We take so much for granted in the presidential election process, especially the fact that we expect the debates to be among the front runners. And we don't even question the fact that the media doesn't do something like, all right, we're going to have a full House debate of all of the major candidates for the existing political parties in the United States. People who are polling at 6%, 4%, 8%, that's still millions of people in the United States of America, tens of millions of people. And so we'll do a full House debate with all of the candidates and also do a debate of just the two main frontrunners. That's fine. Why don't we do that? And once you realize that we just take it for granted that they choose the two major candidates of the establishment parties, you kind of question it. Why don't we do that? Why doesn't the media do it? And it's because they have a vested interest in maintaining the uniparty that protects their interests. But I think we need to get to a place where people demand that from the media and they don't accept that the media is just favoring the two major parties. And I think we're really either at that point or getting very close to that point. And people are really, voting with their views. We've seen major channels like CNN have increasingly less views, 27% less over the last year. And so as people start to question media outlets that just make decisions in the direction of corporate interests, they're starting to not watch them. They're starting to trust, news sources that will actually entertain the independent candidates that are running that aren't getting airtime elsewhere.
Stick with us. More Rising right after this.